I am Glendora Lashley. Welcome to the Talk the Tingz mini podcast. Talk the Tingz is part of the ongoing work by the Lilly Foundation for Human Development to combat gender-based abuse and violence in Tobago. This podcast is in partnership with the Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and it is in support of the Spotlight Initiative, which is a global partnership between the European Union and the United Nations. The Spotlight Initiative is working in partnership with the government of Trinidad and Tobago. In this episode of Talk the Tingz, we are talking with representatives from the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. We have Liselle Anthony Douglas, team lead for the Investigation and Intervention Unit, and we have Lynette Bacchus-Best, team lead for the Child Justice Unit, both attached to the Tobago Division, Tobago Office of the Children's Authority. Hi, ladies, and welcome to this mini podcast, Talk the Tingz.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having us.
It's good to be here. Morning.
All right, so let me perhaps offer some kudos to you all on the good hard work that you all have started in Tobago, and hopefully as we go along, the continued positive interventions will help to eliminate violence, gender-based violence and abuse, particularly child abuse. And we're talking today to raise awareness around child sexual violence and abuse, specific to boys and girls in Tobago. But before we get into all of that, I'd like to just ask to have you ladies remind us, let's suppose somebody happens upon this podcast and they've never heard of the Children's Authority, or they've heard of it and they're not quite sure what's the role of the Children's Authority. Can you share what exactly is the Children's Authority meant to do in Trinidad and Tobago?
Okay, I'll take that question. So the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago is a child protection agency. It is responsible for the care and protection of all children in Trinidad and Tobago who are under the age of 18. So once you fall between 0 to 18, the Children's Authority are responsible for your care and protection. And we care and protect children who are victims of abuse. And when we say abuse, we categorize this by physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, and neglect. So the Children's Authority has been in existence since 2015, and we are governed by key pieces of legislation. And those legislations are the Children's Act, the Children's Authority Act, the Children's Community Residence Act, the Foster Care and Nurseries Act, the Adoption Act, the Adoption of Children Amended Act, and the Foster Care Regulations. So those pieces of legislation is what governs our practice in Trinidad and Tobago.
Wow, okay, thank you. That's a lot of legislation there, boy.
Yes, because they all have to do with children.
Yeah, and the protection of children, as you said. So when
Correct.
we look at...
If I can actually shed a little more light to what my colleague would have shared. Apart from all of those key legislations, basically to sum it up, we promote the well-being of the child. So as much as we may focus on anything, levels of abuse that are reported to us, we promote the well-being of the child. You know, we take those reasonable steps first to prevent children from suffering those ill treatment and neglect. And of course, you know, we act as an advocate. Most definitely, you know, you heard the name, the Children's Authority. We act as the advocates to promote the rights of the child and their responsibilities, and basically to recognize and give efforts to the rights of parents as well. To, yes, it's Children's Authority, but it's not just only specific for the child, but it's also, assisting and helping families on a whole to be able to better function and cope in society as well. So, those are some of the core duties as well that we focus on as well.
But a very holistic approach.
Correct.
Correct.
So
Correct.
the well-being of a child, which is the holistic approach, not only looking at the child.
All right, so then what does some of the services at the Tobago division look like when we're talking about this holistic approach to child protection, well-being of the child and the child's family? What does the services look like at the Tobago division of the Children's Authority?
So as we mentioned as well too, and we're looking at the holistic, one of the key things we look at, or we strive on in the authority, is to have that whole socio-ecological or systems approach as you want to see, right? So it focuses on, as we say, it's everybody's involved. So we look at the family, the community, the child, the neighbor, it's everybody involved. So when you come to the authority, it's not just only about the child, but promoting that holistic approach. So some of the services that we offer as well too, apart from, as we talk about, we receive reports through our registry system, and those reports are provided through our intervention and investigation units, and they are responsible for investigation cases that come to our attention. And in that as well too, upon investigation, we would provide a level of interventions. So if it's being able to create a treatment plan for that child, to be able to help that child thrive and grow and provide that support for the family. So we have our intervention and investigation unit that provides that, and we'll create treatment plans for the child. We have the department that I'm in, it's the Child Justice Unit. We are responsible basically for reports that come through the court. So the court can also make referrals. A parent can bring a child before the court, and they can then recommend the child to the authority to provide basically monitoring. We provide investigation suitabilities. We provide counseling services as well to support the family. We have our assessment unit. So they provide assessments and be able to create treatment plans for the child as well. So basically medical and psychosocial assessments and therapy as well. And even in all of that, in terms of those services, we would provide monitoring for children who are in children's homes and foster care. We would provide a level of supervision and monitoring there. We would even assist the family in terms of, as we talk about the systems approach, helping out with supervised access and visits to be able to build bond and relationship between siblings or families if they are separated. We'll be able to do that. We do sibling visits. We help with clinic appointments. It's a range of things that we offer here at the authority. We do referrals as well, because the authority is not just a single unit as well, but we work as a collaborative effort between the other child protection agencies and services, social services units, services in Tobago. So we work very closely with the police, our division of health, our child and adolescent. So sometimes when the child does the assessment at the authority, we realize that they may need further assessments. They may need mediation, the family may need mediation, those things. So we do those referrals, those necessary referrals to those external agencies, and we work collaboratively with them to be able to have a better outcome for the family and child.
That's quite a lot of work that you all are doing there. Now, you spoke about your aspect of it, taking reports from the courts. Can you guys share related up-to-date statistics in terms of the number of reports that you've gotten both from the court and non-court, where maybe parents or anonymously people have reported to you guys? What has been the situation in Tobago within the most recent few months or so, if you have that information?
Well, I would say in Tobago, since 2018 to now, we have received over 1,000 cases, and that's a high number given the fact that we're such a small community. In terms of specifically for CJU or investigations, I'm not sure if Lynette has that information separated, but all our referrals come through registry. It is recorded there, and then it's dispersed to the different units that needs to provide intervention. So I can say safely from the investigation and intervention, we have seen over 1,000 cases coming to Tobago. And these are all cases of sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect, child in need of supervision, which we used to call a child beyond control. All these categories we have in Tobago, coming from different villages in Tobago. No area is spared. We may have 1 or 2 villages where you get a little reporting, so the numbers there are a little less, but throughout Tobago, we receive cases regarding abuse of children. And we think that the reason the communities that have less reporting, it could be because of the culture there. You know, the culture in Tobago, we have a way that we don't like to talk out things that we think are a bit embarrassing or would bring shame to the family.
Right.
So if persons know about incidents of abuse, they tend not to want to report to us. But the other thing is people are not really educated on the fact that sexual abuse is in fact against the law. Physical abuse, neglect is against the law, right? Because in the past, we never used to have the Children Act. Nobody knew nothing about any Children Act and any children's rights, but now we have that. In today's world, we have children have rights, right? And we are to care and protect them. They're human beings just like us, and they're more vulnerable than us. Hence, we need to do what we need to do to protect them. So our communities need to be more sensitized on the fact that there is new legislation for the care and protection of children and the way we care for children. So yeah, so the figures that we have is an alarming figure for Tobago, but we at the authority are working on trying to bring that figure down. So we're working on doing sensitizations, you know, we're going out there in the schools. As my colleague Lynette said, we're collaborating with other stakeholders. We're doing sensitizations with them as well, so that the professionals as well who encounter issues of sexual abuse in the communities, they too can report. Right. Because if you're a social worker in the, let's say, the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection, and you might go out on a regular case for some kind of social issue, and you reach upon an issue with sexual abuse or neglect or physical abuse, they have a duty to report. So we are trying to educate and collaborate with persons about reducing the abuse on the island.
Now, let me ask you this, Liselle, with respect to those numbers, do you have a breakdown of what is most reported? Is it sexual abuse? Is it physical abuse? Is it neglect?
Yes, you hit the target.
Yeah, so if I could zero in a little bit more as exactly I was going to share. So the 3 most reported issues or challenges that we get is sexual abuse, physical abuse, and neglect. Liselle would have shared within that fiscal year as well, when we're looking at a percentage, sexual abuse and neglect were the 2 highest within the past year, right? With 26.8% in reported sexual abuse and neglect at 26.4%, physical abuse being next with 19.1% of reported cases within that year. And even zeroing in, when we look at it, the age group that is highest reported of receiving fall within those categories are between the 10 to 13 age group. So that teenage years, that pre-teen age year, you see those highest levels. But even narrowing down, when we calculate it, it's almost about children under the age of 1 to that age fall into the most category. It's about 67% reported fall between that under 1 to 13 year age group. So most of those reported cases fall within that bracket. We have the other lower ones, yes, that come in with emotional abuse as well. You asked about in terms of the reports from courts. Children that are reported to us from courts are children in need of supervision. So it's a lower population that's reported to court, yes, but it's still a number fall within that 6.8% of children that are deemed children in need of supervision through the courts. So you're seeing those three main areas there of sexual abuse, neglect, and physical abuse being most reported to the authority.
Wow, okay. Have you all been able to capture any sort of information on perhaps why that particular age group is most vulnerable? The 10 to 13 with respect to the highest numbers, and then even 13 and under. When you all have done your investigations and perhaps even spoken to alleged perpetrators, is there any sort of information as to why that particular age group is so vulnerable, why they are the higher number of victims?
I don't think that we have captured that data, but I can say these children are probably the most vulnerable within the age group that we look at. They could hardly defend themselves as compared to the teenagers who might be able to stand up for themselves a little better, you know. And Glendora, it's strange to say that the perpetrators of all these abuse are persons that these children know.
Right.
Persons that these young children between the age of 0 to 13 trust and look up to. Right? So yeah, it's not a good thing that is happening in our society, and the authorities working very hard to try to bring those things down.
Let me ask you guys,
educate persons.
In smaller societies like Tobago, you usually find sometimes very high instances of social ills, much like sexual abuse and all these other types of abuse. In Tobago in the past, you know, we used to say, well, okay, a small space, everybody kind of jam up. Sometimes it's perhaps a child alone with the adult perpetrator and so on. Have you all managed to see any change in the landscape? Is it that we have the same sort of landscape? Are there any new factors? Let's say like during the COVID pandemic, active restriction times, the number of cases for all types of abuse seem to have escalated sky high because a lot of people are just home, right? But even before that, before COVID, if I remember correctly, the number of cases were also being, that were reported, were also being increased. Is this based on the increased awareness and education by the Children's Authority and other relative agencies? Is it that we really just have a high number all about, but a lot of it isn't reported? Or are we actually having a lot of new perpetrators?
I think it's a mixture of all.
Yeah.
What do you think, Lynette? I think it's a mixture of all. Because we have the persons that are reporting because they are now educated about it. So we would have even persons who are in church groups and stuff. If they notice something in the church, they notice something strange with a child in the church, they would report to us, right? We have neighbors calling in. If they notice a child staying at home alone 1 or 2 times, they will call it in. Mind you, I might add that our calling is anonymous. Persons don't need to leave their names and that kind of thing. They just call and give us information about the child, where the child is and what they're seeing, right? So I think, yes, the information is going out there. And I think, yes, there are a lot of people who are still not reporting because of the stigma and because of the shame that it brings to the community and their family in general. So,
and even if I should mention it, as we would have seen an increase in reported cases, especially during the COVID period. And then, as you know, a lot of times, specifically schools, with the closure of schools and daycares, children are home more. So usually sometimes school is looked at as a safe place for a child. So something may have been happening with the child, but used it as a and use school as a kind of safe haven to be away from home. So even now as children were home more, you saw that some of the cases, and I'm not saying specifically for Tobago, but we would have seen a rise within that 2019, 2020 bracket there, an increase in reported cases because your children were home more, like you say, they have more opportunities, parents are home with them more. So you will see a lot more of those reported cases coming in. So we did see a trend, especially within the COVID period as well happening.
So do we need, is it that we need some greater outreach or greater types of intervention? Because part of the issue seems to be, okay, you have perpetrators, and I'm going to share from the Child Protection Unit of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the inspector in charge, Inspector Dexter Miller. He said that for them, TTPS Child Protection Unit, 100% of the perpetrators in child sexual abuse cases were male, right? He also spoke about a highlight age of between 19 and 35, where the majority of those perpetrators fit demographically, right? What I am wondering here with respect to Tobago, in the past, we had the issue, and I think, Liselle, you raised this about people just being hush-hush, you know, you're feeling shame, is your family, that kind of thing. But during COVID, a whole lot of people were home. So is it that some people are really just turning a blind eye? Is it that when the children come to the Children's Authority, they're saying to you, okay, we're telling you, but we didn't tell the other adults in the home? What exactly is happening in the homes around Tobago with respect to so many people, I suppose, being around, but there's still time to abuse and violate children?
From my observation, with the peak that we had within the COVID period last year, the peak that we had were more so around the teenagers. I don't know if it's because they had too much time on their hands because they weren't exactly in school and that kind of thing. So we had a lot of reports about teenagers who just, some of them would just say, oh, they just met this guy online, or oh, this person just came up from Trinidad and they met them. And, you know, so for me, what I saw, it was a raise in the teenage age group in terms of the sexual abuse and that kind of thing. So it could be because they had a lot of free time on their hands, some of them not attending school when they should be attending school. So when the parent, those who were able to go to work, think that they're home online doing their schoolwork, they on their own mission. So then in that case, you had a slight deviation from the norm where you had a lot of reports, teenagers in particular, being abused and violated by strangers as opposed to people known to them normally. Correct. Or persons that they just casually know. Okay. Because I know when the act changed, and in the past, someone who was 16 years old and above could give consent to sex. Then they changed it to 18. And there was also the amendment to say, well, okay, you can't leave somebody who is under the age of 18 home alone. That amounts to neglect or child abandonment or something of the sort. You all would know the more legal terms. And I remember asking, how will this affect Tobago? Because by nature, many older teenagers are the ones who are left home alone, sometimes playing a parental role for younger siblings. But now the law says, listen, these are all children and they need adult supervision. So is there something that you guys are working on at the Children's Authority with respect to helping parents to understand you can't leave your teenagers home alone? Have you been getting resistance from the Tobago and I suppose even the Trinidadian public about the idea of a 16-year-old? You mean to tell me a 16-year-old can't stay home by themselves and cook and look after the little brother and sister? And that is exactly the response that we get from people when we do sensitizations. Exactly that. At Lendora, even when we do sensitization with churches and we talk about physical abuse, we members coming up and saying, But the Bible talk about
Fear not the rod and spoil the child, yes.
Right, so we have to continue pushing the sensitization and changing the mindset of the people of Tobago, that we now have these laws that says we cannot do this, you should not do this because it is an offense. So that is what we are feverishly doing. We have our Facebook Live sessions where we have different professionals coming in and sharing from their perspective, right? We have our, we go out to schools, we do a lot of online sessions, we do a lot of online groups like with white classes, that kind of thing. So we try to reach everybody, try to reach NGOs, the stakeholders, the Division of Health, the medical social workers. We're just out there sensitizing.
Right.
If I could also join with my colleague, that's the thing. So as you rightfully mentioned, we've had this culture for a very long time that is okay to leave, like you say, a 16-year-old home, that they're old enough, they're responsible, they're accountable. And we have this mentality as well, so as Liselle said, spare the rod and spoil the child. So many a times we may think, and you will hear a lot of persons say, well, back in the day when I was growing up, my mother beat me with a guava whip or a spoon, and you know that was normal for us and that kind of thing. So it's about changing the culture and the mindset that we have within Tobago. These things are forms of abuse, you know, to damage the child. It damages the child not only physically, but emotionally and mentally and spiritually. And what we try to do is promote the ability for a child to be able to share their views and share their rights. We have this culture as well too. If the child shares how they feel, oh, you don't answer my back. You're answering my back.
Yes.
You're rude.
So, and all of these things result in a parent maybe lashing out at the child and that kind of thing. So it really is a matter of sensitizing parents to the fact that we need to take a softer approach when dealing with children. For me, I deem it the term conscious discipline. It's easy for a parent to just beat a child when they do something wrong. But how effective really it is for the child to understand what they did wrong. You create more of a fear within the child rather than for the child to fully understand what I did was wrong and I need to change my behavior. And that it takes time. And I think as Liselle said, with the number of sensitization that we're having with NGOs, with faith-based organization, you know, we really need to promote the culture of these are new legislations are in place. We band on the rights and responsibilities of the child, and you know, it's a cultural and sensitization of these things that we have to do, and for families and neighbors, not thinking that it's normal, but if you see something, say something. As the term that we always use, child protection is everybody's business. It's not just for the authority or for the NGOs or these persons, but it's everybody's business. If you are in town and you see a child walking the streets by themselves or selling stuff for money, this is a form of under our section 22 that falls under child in need of care and protection. That's begging and selling. So all of these things are things that we need to be aware of. So and we need to raise awareness.
Lynette, I feel like your unit, the child justice unit, you may have to start locking up as parents, because you know, the reality is, I am bred Tobagonian. Let me put it like that. And I remember some years ago, I was in the UK talking with a UK person, UK born, grown individual, but African ancestry in terms of Caribbean, a Black person. And he was saying to me, he was a parent of 2 teen children at the time, or grown children, and he was saying that licks, beating a child is really the parent's frustration, as Lynette just pointed out. And at the time I thought, yeah, that's true. At the time I wasn't a parent, and so I was, you know, on my high horses saying, well, yeah, we really need to change and so on. Circle a few years later, becoming a parent, I've had to find all sorts of creative ways to really stagnate my default reaction, because I am fully for not hitting children. But I will be a hypocrite to say that it's very easy. I found out even my own situation. I have an 8-year-old now, and sometimes I have to say to my child, listen, go in your room, close your door, don't tell me anything. Because the mood I'm in and the reaction, listen, you're really going to lose it, you know. And sometimes I feel like for us who are active parents, when we have to, you know, go through day to day, the pressure hard. You're not a grandparent who live your life with little responsibilities so you could nice them up and so on. When you're the active parent, the pressure hard. And so what I wanted to figure out is if the Children's Authority, perhaps looking at intervention in that way, with respect to helping us regular Tobagonian people who born and grow up on licks, a box, a pot spoon, a iron cord, wherever. What can you all do for us if you are thinking about that, if that is your mandate at all?
Right.
So definitely. So the core focus as well to our philosophy is building the capacity within the family. You know, many people have the stigma when they hear the authority or we come to remove somebody. It's not that. It's really building the capacity of the family. And in focusing, as we mentioned, some of the services, the counseling services that we offer is working with the parents as well too, or even not just only the authority, but there are a lot of other agencies around
that we refer
that works with the family as well, even the court. So the child comes from the court, and if we realize after investigations and psychosocial interventions that we do, we realize that, okay, there may be an issue in terms of the parent capacity to discipline. We then would make those recommendations for the counselor to work with the parent, directly focusing on key areas. So it's not just a holistic counseling we do. If we see that there is a particular need after we investigate that, okay, parenting skills is lacking, we will do the necessary referrals for those parents to get that parenting skills to be able to.
You don't feel, Lynette and Liselle, that is all of us here in Tobago need that reinforcement?
Correct. Because I wanted to say, Glendora, that sometimes you would be surprised that the persons that you think that, like, without stigmatizing or anything, they have a good job and, you know, you would think they would know better. But when these reports come in and you're like, okay, these people just don't realize what they're doing, you know.
Pressure is pressure.
They just don't realize it.
Pressure is pressure. And you know, you see what you said there, it's so important because something that we at the Lily Foundation for Human Development keep realizing all the time is that perception of who's supposed to know what. And the perception, you know, it have some perpetrators, people that get real like, oh my God, he or she do that, them from a good family, them bright, them this, them that. Everybody under pressure. And sometimes high functioning people with busy lives, busy jobs, and so on, they are sometimes experiencing a different kind of pressure. And they are sometimes the easiest to lash out and abuse and violate children and others around them. So are we looking at even that kind of intervention? And that's why I asked if perhaps we don't need a more mass program, because at this point you can't really exclude anybody from being a potential perpetrator, can we?
No, you can't. You can't. Anybody can be.
Now, I want to, this conversation getting a little too sweet for me. I could keep the whole morning. I want to ask about, I know you all have spoken a lot about all of the services that the Children's Authority, especially here at the Tobago Division, will offer. But for somebody who perhaps comes upon this podcast episode and they are thinking about making a report, and as Lynette, you had said, there's the perception that if you call the Children's Authority, they're going to take away the picnic them from the home. Nobody wants that unless, you know, it's a very serious situation. Can you walk us through perhaps what happens when a child is referred to the Children's Authority after we've made a report anonymously or not? What exactly happens with a child?
Okay, so once the registry unit receive a call from any member of the public, We even receive calls from persons living abroad as well that may have, spoken to some family member and heard something or they know something. So anybody could call the Children's Authority on that 996 number, 800-2014. Once we receive those reports are then investigated. So it goes out to the investigation team. The investigation team does a thorough investigation based on what we received. So they would go out to the family home and they would interview everybody in the home based on what we know. Now, as I told you, Tobago people, they're very hush-hush. So the first question we always get on this team here when you go out, who report that? Who tell her that?
Yes.
So Akil is that woman down the road telling Dora, we do not disclose the report from. Even though the name on the report, we do not disclose. We are just there to report what we heard about this child to figure out if it is substantiated or not and how we could move forward to help change the situation. So the CSA, which is like a social worker, would go out and do their investigation. Every member of the home is interviewed. We do our community inquiries. We do, if there's need for us to go in the school, like if something is not settling with us and we need to go into the school, because you may not know that a child is different in school to a child home. Eh? So if we're not able to get information from the child per se at home, we could also interview the child at school. We could speak to the principal, speak to the teacher, get from their perspective, what they know about this child, what have they observed about this child, without letting them know the specifics of the report.
Right.
Because we're very confidential on who we share information and what information we share with them, right? Once we complete the investigation process, we come up with a recommendation for intervention. And that is when the referrals would come in, right? So,
so basically a treatment plan, a care plan, as we say.
Correct.
Right. You know
how we're going to move forward.
Two things, Lynette, you kept saying treatment plan, and I was supposed to bring this up before to say, I might want to consider changing that word treatment. You know how Tobago just respond.
Yes. We call it care plan as well.
Yeah.
Right. You know how we respond to words. But Liselle, with respect to something that you said there, listen, oh boy. Tobago, we have a special ability on this little island. And plenty of we believe that this is the universe gift to us, that we could put two and two together. You see how you say people say, they're asking you, okay, so who report this or so and so? I am wondering about the potential after effects for some people, sometimes innocently so, because of the tendency for us to put two and two together. So the Children's Authority show up to make an investigation into a report that you get, and somebody decide, well, it had to be Miss Blue from the green and red house that does always have on the yellow shirt.
Yes, we don't confirm anything. And even when we do the community inquiries, which is going out to the persons in the community, the fellas that lining on the block, the Miss Jean by the shop, these are the people that we will go and ask information. Once we identify ourselves, some people might back. Some people might say, well, I can't talk to you now. Some people might give you a paper with a phone number and say, call me. And they will give you the whole story.
Right.
Who come in when, what they're doing, what they're wearing, they're telling you everything, but they're just not telling you so that the person we're investigating knows.
Gotcha.
And we try to be very discreet, because when, for example, when we are doing our reports, we don't put names. We will put a community member indicated that, stated that, said that. We're not saying who the person is. So we're not saying Miss Jean down by the corner shop, or the two fellas that just hung out the road between 4 and 6 by the junction said. No, we just put a community member.
Yeah. Have you found that people are more willing to share information now? Like as I said in the past, people were very kind of hush-hush. We still hush-hush to some extent, but I guess with your increased reports, is it that more people are feeling empowered to share, or is it more victims are feeling empowered to make the reports?
I feel people are inclined to share based on who the report is about.
Correct.
So you see, if you go in a community and there's some kind of a family that we think up there and highfalutin, or a family that they know.
Or even a specific community, for example.
Oh, correct.
If you go in a particular community and you know that community is for everybody. I could share an example. Once I went to do a suitability assessment for a family, and I'm asking the persons in the community, hey, you know of this person, I'm looking for this person. And they refuse to say, I don't know who's that. And literally, the person was literally 2 houses away from where the person was. When we found the place eventually. But they believe that, okay, that's probably police, or they probably think, or they're looking for somebody, so I'm not going to say nothing. So and there are other communities that will be like, sure, no problem, they live right up the road. So it really depends on sometimes as well to the community that's willing to share, that kind of thing, that we have those challenges.
Do you guys go out with photo ID badges when you're making these investigations and asking community members anything? Like, do you say, well, okay, I am Lynette Bacchus-Best, team lead from the Children's Authority, and they see your photo and your name and so on?
Yes. We all have IDs, but I can tell you from my team, we only show it when it's necessary.
All right.
So we don't pull up in the vehicle and come out with a badge hanging out and whatever. We come out, we look for the home. When we find the home and we find the person that we need to speak to, then we pull out our ID badge and say, I am so-and-so from the Children's Authority. Right? If we go in the community and we're going on a block, because plenty times is the block again, the information from a vendor.
Oh yes.
Plenty on them block. So we'll wait until you reach, you're in front of the person, then you will pull out your ID to say, well, I am so. We tend not to broadcast, right? And that is our next thing to say. We try our best not to go with the police, because people are associated with the police. Now, we work hand in hand with the police, yes, but if we don't have to go in with the police, Glendora, we will go on our own.
Yeah, because the police is intimidating. It sends a threatening. Understood.
But if there are cases where we have to go with the police, when I call Sergeant Miller, Douglas, just tell me what time you're ready to move, and that we work together.
Of course, they're very high risk situations that we would need to be very cautious about doing that, but we really try our best not to have that involvement unless it's utter necessary, where we believe that it may be a risk to the child, or even to the to us if we go in there alone. So that's when we take those necessary precautions to do that. But we really try to reach them on a personal level when trying to reach out to get the necessary information.
Totally understood.
But I want to throw this in here too, Glendora. We receive as well malicious reports.
Oh yeah.
We receive reports, oh, they leave the child home, they just always leave the child home and go to work. When you go on out there, the shop owner will tell you, nah, them two little children, them always with their mother, the woman always passing here with her children, them children always neatly dressed. You sure? You sure is a woman up? So you want to know, who would be so vindictive to call the Children's Authority and give such information? So we have a lot of malicious people out there as well, which is why it is important that the investigators do a thorough investigation. I always say to them, if something is not settling well on your mind, you go back. Go when the person didn't expect you to be around. You understand?
Correct.
Because sometimes we call and tell them you're coming. Them know you're coming.
They put everything in place.
Correct. Thank you. And that is why we tend to interview children as well separately. Because if it's a sexual abuse we're going in on, we don't want to interview the child when the perpetrator in the home.
Right.
So you would find we will either try to get the child at this facility, the assessment center, or we go in to the school. And we just get that child on their own. Right? And you know,
that's very,
because
very
you know how to get the questions and the answers.
correct. You're trained for that. And that's actually very good to hear. And hopefully those people, because boy, oh boy, you're right about the malicious ones. You have some people with some evil intent, and then you have some people who believe that what they see translate to what they think when it's not necessarily that way. But I want to ask you guys, because oh my gosh, I'm taking up all the time here. You talked just recently there about getting the child on their own. I want to ask you about your interaction with perpetrators or alleged perpetrators. How has that been? Do we have perpetrators who are willing to say, yes, I did this, and willing to explore why they have done this? What is the experience with the Children's Authority and perpetrators?
Well, for us in the investigation, we try to interview everybody, because when we provide a court report, we cannot seem biased. So we have to present the information from all persons, perpetrator or not. If the perpetrator is willing to share the information, we take the information. If not, Glendora, that is when the police comes in, and the police will do what they need to do in their line of investigation. So we would just report that the perpetrator did not meet with the CSA, or did not want to share, or prefer not to speak, that kind of thing.
Right, okay.
I just wanted to add in there before, in terms of questioning children, we also have forensic interviews. So for cases where we are not quite sure what is happening, the police, some information for them seem a bit muffled or iffy, for want of better words, we can do forensic interviews, and we do it right here at the assessment center in Tobago, where we have a trained interviewer come to Tobago to do the interview.
Okay.
Which is then provided to the court.
Correct. So if I have to add, because I like how she asked the question, you know, do the perpetrators or alleged perpetrators are free to come out? I mean, it all depends. You have to be very, I want to say, tactful. So you're not going in, okay, you receive a report and they may give a name of who the alleged perpetrator may be. You're not going to that person and say, hey, do you so and so and so, do so and so and so. So the person, right? You kind of coax the person to let them know, okay, it's a conversation that we're having, you know, and just generally ask certain things, and from that you'll be able to get specific things. So we have to be a bit, it's really on the approach. Some people, obviously, if they may think that, you know, they feel that they are being targeted, you may have a bit of resistance, but we try to, at least as Liselle said, not be biased only for the child, but kind of be able to let the parents know, hey, we want to hear your perspective,
your version.
We want to hear your side of things. You know, how do you see the situation happening? How do you see that happening? And within that too, they talk a lot when they feel a little more comfortable in knowing that we're not targeting you in any particular way. You tend to get persons to open up a bit more to you. So it's very tactful on how you use the approach in interviewing alleged perpetrators.
Have you guys come across a perpetrator who is of the belief that, listen, me pick me for break them out first? Have you all come across those kinds of perpetrators?
I would have to say no.
I've never had anyone who would outrightly admit to that. No.
Okay, all right. So more time on the block and it might come out, I know. But we have some very interesting beliefs. And that's why I keep asking about, you know, kind of getting to the root causes and then perhaps trying to make interventions based on that, because we've seen that abuse and violence is a perpetual cycle. Many people don't wake up today and just start abusing somebody else or violating somebody else. Many times they themselves were victims, or they were indirectly, they were there in the home, you know, like physical domestic violence abuse. Many times you will see that the people who are now perpetrating, they may have been in a home where that's what they saw. that's what happened right through.
Even if I should add to that, it's a taboo thing that we don't talk about, especially in Tobago, but also mental health is play a very big role.
Yes.
In some of the issues when we look into it. So yes, you're rightfully correct. Some persons, alleged perpetrators, may have been abused in the past, but then there are also persons with severe mental health issues that, you know, because in terms of their cognitive ability to think and to process things, you see issues there as well.
We need a whole next podcast, you know, Lynette, because
that's right.
You're gonna get me started.
And then, depending on the abuse too, sometimes it's the person's circumstances or social situation why this abuse may take place.
Yeah.
I would give you an example. Sometimes people don't have money. They're not employed and the money not flowing as it should. So there's no school open back. Let me say school open back for standard 5 children now. We might get a report that a child not coming to school. Why the child not coming to school? When you go out to investigate, it's because the parent don't have no money.
Yeah, nothing to eat, no clothes.
The child outgrow the school uniform.
Yeah.
And in 8 weeks, you want me to go and buy a shirt, why finding money to buy a shirt? Something as simple as that.
Yeah.
Very of neglect.
Yeah. So that's why in the investigations, it's building the family capacity. Because like you say, the school will call and say they haven't seen the child for how much weeks and, you know, think something wrong. But when you look at it, it's a financial issue. So the authority upon that investigation, if you see that that's the concern, then we would make the necessary referrals. Okay, it's not really a matter of neglect per se, but it's a matter of, okay, this family needs some financial support. Whatever where you know, with divisions or that can help with those providing, if it's public assistance, food cards, that can help reduce the stress of that financially, we provide that support to them.
Real facts. Y'all ladies hitting 6s this morning. Real facts you're talking about there. Now, as we wrap up, I want to ask you one last question, and this is around potential solutions in terms of what we haven't explored, because we've explored the intervention, we've explored the need for holistic restoration of families, you know, really equipping the adults in the families and so on. But sometimes you kind of need some external help. And I will say that our minister with responsibility for Gender and Child Affairs, as well as the current secretary with responsibility for health, wellness, and social protection, both of them have put forward the possibility of foster care and adoption as a potential option with respect to helping children who are victims of child sexual abuse and all other types of abuse and violence. If someone comes, well, Minister said that the first call you need to make is to the Children's Authority. If you're thinking about getting into foster care or thinking about adoption, the call is to the Children's Authority. Neither of you are directly in this, but can you share perhaps what are the requirements, if you know it offhand, to be able to get into foster care and adoption, particularly for Tobagonians who may be thinking of either of these options?
So that's the thing. If you are interested, give us a call, right? Because yes, as we have our adoption and foster care units within the authority that are responsible for approving alleged foster carers. And you know, if you are thinking about adoption, we have that adoption unit who would also have you on an approved list. There are particular requirements that has to be met, yes, but of course everything is looked at because everybody's circumstances is different, right? So we encourage persons to really call the authority if you are interested. And again, looking at it from a Tobago's perspective, you know, we have children who live with aunts and uncles, you know, because, you know, the parent may not be able to care for the child or probably working all the time. So they have the child living with a family member. You know, that's really, as we call it, kingship care. We want these things to be legitimized, right? Because they may be living there, but you may not have any sort of legal standing to care for the child. You know, all of these things could fall under the foster care. You know, so you may be caring for somebody's child because, you know, the family cannot have the capacity, but you don't have any legal standing. So we want to be able to create that, to legitimize that for you by being a foster parent, right? With being a foster parent, there's also a stipend attached to it. So, you know, the authority can help you provide further care to that person for that child financially. So, so you may actually be someone who's caring for somebody's child right now. The authority can help you with that. So give us a call. Liselle would have provided the numbers before. You can call our registry hotline. They will transfer you to our foster care and adoption units, and you could seek their guidance, because there are our Foster Cares Act, our Community Residence Foster Care Nurseries Act, that the foster care units abides by in terms of having those specific requirements met to have someone approved to be a foster parent. So it's an encouragement. If you are interested, give us a call. We would be happy to provide that information to you.
All right, and that's 996 or 800-2014.
Correct, but Lendora, I just wanted to add or to show how somebody could end up in foster care coming through the Children's Authority system. Once investigations are completed and it is determined that the report is substantiated, and for some reason we have to remove a child from the care of their family, their mother and father, because they're in imminent danger, if we do not have any other family member that is willing to come forward or has been assessed to be able to take care of this child, that is when we can use foster care as an option, which is why Lynette had to use the words approved foster carer. So our foster care team will do their assessment and that kind of thing for us to have approved foster carers, so that we know when we place in a child in foster care, we place in a child to somebody who is more than capable of caring for the child.
And if we could use this forum as well, as Liselle said, a child thrives better with a family unit. So we have 3 community residences in Tobago. That's the reality of things. So really and truly, if a child is in imminent danger and we do not have a family member, the first thing we look for is a family member, somebody else who the child is familiar with and knows that they would feel comfortable. That's the first stance that we look at. And then if not, you know, we look at foster care, because it's a smaller unit as well. You know, so we try to focus on having that let the child feel a sense of family and a sense of belonging rather than a group home. Yeah, but the reality is, though, Tobago, we do not have that much approved foster carers. Liselle, if you may correct me, we have about 3 or 5?
3 or 5, yeah. It's not 5. And again, it's because of our culture. Again, in Glendora, people have to get used to the fact of this foster caring situation. And as said, we already doing it, you know. We already doing it. Get people to understand that you can do it legally now.
Yeah. You're very right. Us here in Tobago, as with many other micro societies, when things appear to get more structured, we get fearful. Sometimes because we don't understand, and sometimes because it's really intimidating. And so I hope that, you know, as we go along, you all are able to reach more people and positively turn around more minds, so that we may have, you know, a good enough complement of foster carers available. I suppose more people may be open to adoption, but you know, that's another different kind of process. But let's hope for the best. Fingers crossed. I really wish you guys all the best, and thank you for taking the time out to chat with me. Lynette, Bacchus-Best, Team Lead for Child Justice Unit, Tobago Division, and Liselle Anthony Douglas, Team Lead for Investigation and Intervention, that unit at the Tobago Division of the Children's Authority. I will really have to put in a request for us to have some more conversations, because I feel like this should be a weekly conversation in Tobago. You know what I mean? You ladies are quite passionate. I hear it in your voices. I like the fact that you all are sounding relatable, and the information that you've given today, you know, it's down to earth. I think it's what the average Tobagonian will appreciate. You know, they will be able to relate to the things that you're saying. Many of them may perhaps know who you guys are, you know, but this is what we need to do for our island culture, right? Mm-hmm. It has to be specific to the Tobago case. And this is, for me, the most important thing about all of these initiatives with respect to making Tobago a better place. It is understanding how Tobago is, who we are as Tobagonians, respecting that, and then attempting to help positively, where you meet people where they are and say, well, listen, I am so-and-so, this is what I would like to do. What do you think about it? You know what I mean? That kind of way.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for having us.
All right. Take care. All the best. Enjoy your weekend.
Okay, then. Bye.